So what's it like when gaming on a first generation i7? Let's find out today on Nelly's Nerd Cave. Welcome back to Nelly's Nerd Cave, and today what we're going to look at is the first generation i7. This is the i7-860. Again, three numbers, not four like we used to. This is an 1156. It runs at 2.8 gigahertz and has a maximum TDP of 95 watts. The nice thing about this is it's 4 cores, 8 threads. However, it was released in 2009, which makes this a 15-year-old processor. So, as with all my videos, I start with, when I'm testing things, I start with all the things that are going to be kept roughly the same. First of all is the Kioxia Xperia 480GB 2.5-inch SSD. It's a 480GB, it doesn't have much space on it. It has Windows 10, 3D Mark Time Spy, and a few games. For my purposes, I don't really want to test every single game. This is enough. It also means it's going to be consistent. One of the other things that I'd change, or don't change should I say, is my cooler. This is the Thermalright Assassin King. It comes with a 120mm fan. It's a really good air cooler. It has 6 heat pipes on the bottom and they're flattened off really nicely, and every time I've used this it has some great performance, even when I'm using it on server technologies. Another thing that I'm going to keep the same is the amount of RAM. Obviously, as I move up the generations of processor, the speeds and the type of RAM will change, whether it's DDR3 or DDR4. The amount of RAM I'm using on all tests is going to be 16 gigabytes. For this one, for the first generation, what I have is 4 sticks of 4 gigabytes. This is down to the fact that this motherboard that I'm using at this present moment in time unfortunately has a limit on each RAM slot for 4 gigabytes maximum. I don't have 4 identical pieces of RAM, but what I do have is I have 2 matching pairs. I have the SK Hynix DDR3. This is a 4 gig stick and there's 2 of those. And there's also some Kingston HyperRAM. Again, 4 gigabytes and there's 2 of those. All this is DDR3 and they are all set to run at 1333 megahertz. So hopefully shouldn't be too much of an issue when it comes to the speed of RAM and how much RAM that we're using. It's just the manufacturer that's slightly different on each one of these. I'm using the motherboard, that is the BioStar H55 A+. I've had this since it was first released. A really good board. It's lasted very, very well. It's been taken apart and put together so many times. It's unbelievable, and it's a really good board to use for these types of tests. Now, with all my benchmarking that I do, I'm using the same 3 graphics cards that I've used previously in my i3 series. I'm first of all using the MSI GTX 970. This is the Gaming Pro version. It is 4 gigabytes of GDDR5 and has a clock speed of 1253. It's a really good card. Again, I've had this since it first came out. It's quite power hungry and gets very, very, very warm, but performs very, very well, and we'll see that later on. This card came out in 2014 and is PCI Generation 3. The second card that I'll be using is this one, and this is the Palette GTX 1650. This is the Game Pro edition and it's overclocked. Now, it still does have 4 gigabytes of RAM, and this is 4 gigabytes of GDDR6. It has a clock speed of 1410 and is PCIe Generation 3. Now, the remarkable thing about this card is it was released in 2020 and it's only got 4 gigabytes of RAM. It's a pretty good card, but doesn't play all games at high at all. You'll tend to find that a lot of the games and a lot of the settings that I'm using are medium to help with this particular card. However, what sometimes happens is we have a little bit of a difference with the clock speeds. Even though this is overclocked, This tends to be a little bit slower than others at times. But this card is still sold today, and in my local PC world, it's sold with a 12100 processor, and it's classed as a gaming PC. This runs 1080p, medium, low, medium settings quite well. Anything higher, you're looking at something a bit bigger and better. And talking of bigger and better, we have the RTX 3060. This is the MSI Ventus 2X. This has 12 gigabytes of GDDR6. It runs at 1807 megahertz and is PCI Generation 4. This card was released in 2021 and is very, very capable of running some of these games at 1440p on high settings very easily, because it has oodles of memory on there that you can really rip into when you're playing games. What I'm also using is I'm using this monitor behind me. This is an MSI monitor. It runs at 145 Hertz. It's a very capable monitor. However, it does have one flaw. It's only 1080p. Why have I chosen 1080p, I hear you cry? For the simple fact that according to the Steam survey that they have once a year, most people are still using 1080p gaming monitors as part of their setup. So I thought it was only fair that I use a similar monitor at 1080p and have a high refresh rate. This will then give all these graphics cards the best opportunity and the best outcomes that I can get for these. So, without further ado, let's get to the build. This video is brought to you by VIP SCD Key. If you head over there using my links in the description below, you'll find they offer cheap OEM Windows 10 and 11 keys for which you can use my discount coded links, which give you big discounts on the specified Windows keys. They also offer Office 2019, which you'll be able to get for only £28.28 using the code NNC2. Follow the links in the description below. Okay, so the GTX 970 under 3D Mark Time Spy had an average frame rate between 17 and 20 frames per second. Its max score was 3172 and its average was 3336. Bearing in mind this is a processor from 2009 and the graphics card is from 2014, so really to match that up you're looking at a 4th generation processor to see if you can get the average score to match. In Doom Eternal we have a frame rate of between 93 and 103 frames per second, which is really good. Onto the GTX 1650 under 3D Mark Time Spy, we have an average frame rate of between 17 and 21 frames per second with a max score of 3096, and there is no average for this one as you can see on screen. Doom Eternal had a maximum frame rate of between 95 and 100 frames per second. The RTX 3060 with 3D Mark Time Spy had a peak of 38 frames per second and its lower speed was 29. It had a max score of 2617, which is almost half its average. Again, we're looking at a 2009 processor here, being used with a card from 2021, so you're not going to get all the performance. There's going to be lots of bottlenecking in there, so that could impede the performance of the card. Under Doom Eternal, we have between 110 and 124 frames per second. So there you have the test results. Can you actually game on a first generation i7-860? You could. Would I recommend it? Not really. You are kind of restricted by the technology at the time. So where could you actually take this? Not very far, to be fair. So we got some very good results on the MSI's RTX 3060. However, I wouldn't be able to push it any further than medium settings, and I did, and it kind of just went a bit flaky and you got a few artifacts on screen, but that could have just been the CPU bottlenecking or other things like that, and my frame rates went right down. You could try faster RAM. Now, if you can get hold of some 2133 DDR3 memory, you could try that. It's very hard to find. A lot of the DDR3 that's out and about that you can buy from places like Computer Exchange is around about 1333. Would I recommend that you do this? Well, not really. What I would suggest is if you're going to go in and you're going to go cheap, I would save a few extra pounds and actually go in on a higher level. You know, maybe something like a 4th or 6th generation i7 or something like that. It's not much more money to go that far up than actually buy these. You can purchase this processor and all the first generations for about 10 to 15 pence from my local Computer Exchange, which sounds absolutely ridiculous to the hundreds of pounds that a 14th generation i7 is. But getting a motherboard for these types of processors can be very difficult to find, and trawling through eBay is not my cup of tea. I don't enjoy it, so therefore I would prefer to be able to get something that's easy to fit and relatively simple to upgrade, and have a nice upgrade path so that I can max it out over time and still be able to play games at high settings if needs be. If you'd like to support what I do, then don't forget to click the bell below and make sure you subscribe to my channel. If you'd really like to help, a lot of this is self-funded, and I am looking at being able to get better equipment and give you a better experience. So if you'd like to support me, buy me a coffee, follow the link below, and I'll also be starting off a Patreon site at some point once I've got my head figured around it. So until next time, I will see you all later.